The blood from my split lip tasted like copper and regret. 11 years. That's how long I'd avoided this house, this town, this nightmare dressed up as family. But death has a way of dragging you back to places you swore you'd never see again. My stepfather's fist had connected with my face exactly 47 seconds after I walked through that door. I counted. Old habits from a childhood spent calculating escape routes and survival strategies. "Welcome home, Claire," he'd sneered, bourbon breath hot against my face. Mom turned away, just like she always did. But here's what Richard didn't know as he stood there, chest puffed out, thinking he'd put me back in my place. I wasn't that scared 17-year-old anymore. I was a forensic accountant for one of Manhattan's most ruthless law firms. I specialized in finding money people thought they'd hidden forever. I'd taken down CEOs, politicians, and con artists with offshore accounts more complex than Richard's entire existence. And 3 days ago, while packing for this trip, I'd received a FedEx envelope from my grandmother. Inside were documents that would burn this house down faster than any match ever could. See, my grandfather didn't just die. He left something behind. Something worth $3.7 million. Something that legally belonged to me. Something Richard thought he could steal the moment I stepped off that plane. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my lawyer. "Everything's ready, just say when." I touched my bleeding lip and smiled. Richard was still talking. Threatening. Posturing. He had no idea the war had already started. And I never lost. Not anymore. This is the story of how I came home for a funeral and ended up burying something else entirely. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect in a town where everyone knows everyone's business but pretends they don't. 73 people showed up. Most of them hadn't spoken to my grandfather in years, but suddenly, they all had touching memories and teary eyes. I sat in the back row, alone. Mom sat up front with Richard's arm around her shoulders like a python claiming its prey. Every few minutes she'd glance back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Fear? Maybe both. My grandmother sat apart from everyone, straight-backed and silent. She caught my eye once and gave the smallest nod. That's when I knew today was the day everything would detonate. After the service, everyone gathered at my grandparents' house. The same house where I'd spent summers learning to ride bikes and winters building snowmen. Before Mom remarried. Before everything turned dark. Richard worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and accepting condolences with practiced sincerity. He'd always been good at playing the role of the grieving stepson-in-law. I watched him from the kitchen, picking at a plate of casserole I had no intention of eating. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned to find my Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister. She looked older than I remembered. Harder. "Grandma asked me to," I said simply. "Richard's been talking about the estate, about how your grandfather would have wanted everything to stay in the family." She emphasized family like I wasn't part of it anymore. "Is that right? Claire, just don't cause trouble. Your mother's finally stable, happy. Richard takes care of her." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to show her the photos I still had buried in a folder on my laptop. Pictures of bruises, of holes in walls, of police reports Mom refused to sign. But I just smiled. "I'm only here to pay my respects." Linda didn't look convinced, but she walked away. That's when my grandmother appeared at my elbow like a ghost. "Follow me," she whispered. "Now." We slipped upstairs while everyone else glutted themselves on potato salad and grief. Grandma led me to my grandfather's study, a room that smelled like leather and pipe tobacco even though he'd quit smoking 15 years ago. She closed the door and locked it. From a hidden drawer in his desk, one I'd never known existed, she pulled out a weathered manila folder. "Your grandfather knew he was dying," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "He had 6 months to get his affairs in order, and he made sure every single thing was airtight. She handed me the folder. Inside were property deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios, and a will that had been filed with 3 different attorneys, notarized, and witnessed by a judge. My hands started shaking as I read. Everything. He'd left me everything. The house worth $1.2 million, the investment accounts, the life insurance policy, the vintage car collection Richard had already been pricing online. All of it bypassed Mom entirely and came directly to me. He never forgave himself for not protecting you, Grandma said quietly, for not seeing what was happening until you were already gone. This was his way of making sure you'd be okay, and making sure Richard never got a penny. Downstairs, I could hear Richard's booming laugh echoing through the house that was now legally mine. I looked at my grandmother. Does Richard know about this? Her smile was cold as winter. He's about to. We descended those stairs like soldiers heading into battle. Richard was holding court in the living room, telling some embellished story about helping my grandfather fix the roof last summer, a roof he'd never touched. I knew, because I'd paid for professionals to do that job when Grandpa called me asking for help. He never asked Richard for anything. That should have been my first clue about what was really going on. Richard, my grandmother's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. We need to talk. You, me, Claire, and Eleanor. Mom's head snapped up at her given name. Nobody called her Eleanor except Grandma when she was serious. Can it wait, Dottie? We're in the middle of... No, it cannot wait. The room went silent. You could have heard a whisper drop. Richard's eyes narrowed, but he played it smooth. Of course. Whatever you need. We moved into the dining room. Grandma shut the doors behind us. Through the glass panels, I could see nosy relatives trying to look casual while clearly attempting to eavesdrop. What's this about? Richard asked. But his voice had an edge now. He sensed danger. Grandma placed the folder on the table. This is Robert's will. Filed 6 months ago with Jensen and Associates downtown, with copies held by 2 additional firms in Columbus and Cleveland. Richard's jaw tightened. I'm aware he had a will. As his son-in-law, I've been handling... You've been handling nothing, Grandma interrupted. Because you were never named executor. I was. Mom looked confused. Mother, what's going on? I stayed silent, letting Grandma orchestrate this. She'd earned that right. Robert left specific instructions: the house, the land, the investments, the vehicles, and all liquid assets totaling approximately $3.7 million. She paused, letting that number sink in. Go entirely to Clare. The color drained from Richard's face, then returned as burning red rage. That's impossible, he sputtered. Robert would never... Robert did exactly that. It's all here, legal, binding, already filed with probate court as of this morning. Mom turned to me, eyes wide. Claire, did you know about this? I found out 10 minutes ago, I said honestly. This is bullshit. Richard slammed his hand on the table. She abandoned this family, ran off to New York and never looked back. She doesn't deserve... What I deserve, I said quietly, is not to be hit in the face when I come home for my grandfather's funeral. Mom flinched. Richard's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That was... You came at me with attitude, Claire. I was defending... There were 17 people in that driveway who saw you hit her unprovoked, Grandma said coldly. I've already got 6 witness statements. Would you like me to file assault charges, or would you like to shut up and listen? Richard looked like he wanted to flip the table. But he was a coward. He'd always been a coward. Bullies always are when someone finally stands up to them. Here's how this works, Grandma continued. Claire inherits everything. You and Eleanor have 60 days to vacate the premises. If you wish to negotiate purchasing any specific items from the estate, you'll do so through Claire's attorney. She slid a business card across the table. Richard picked it up with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read the name. Gerald fucking Whitmore. The Gerald Whitmore. The attorney who'd destroyed 3 Ohio state senators in corruption cases last year. Richard's career was in corrections administration. He knew exactly who Gerald Whitmore was, and what it meant that I'd brought him to this fight. Claire, Mom whispered. Please, we can talk about this. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time in 11 years, I didn't feel guilty. 60 days, I said. The clock starts now. I left that house with everyone staring. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. Just walked out the front door and got into my rental car while Richard's furious voice echoed behind me. My grandmother followed me out. There's more, she said through my car window. Meet me at the lawyer's office tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't be late. She walked away before I could ask what she meant. I drove to the only hotel in town, a Holiday Inn Express that definitely wasn't here when I left, and checked in under a fake name. Old paranoia dies hard. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the look on Mom's face. The shock. The betrayal. Like I was the villain in this story. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was just done being the victim. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Claire, it's me. Mom. My finger hovered over the decline button. Please don't hang up. I'm outside. Can we talk? I went to the window. Sure enough, Mom's Honda was parked under the streetlight, engine running. Against every instinct, I pulled on jeans and went downstairs. She looked small in the driver's seat. Fragile. Nothing like the woman who used to make me feel safe before Richard came into our lives. Get in, she said. I don't think that's a good idea. Richard's passed out drunk at Linda's house. It's just me. Please. I got in. We sat in silence for a full minute before she spoke. You think I didn't know, she said quietly. What he did to you. How he was. You think I just turned my head and let it happen. Didn't you? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I was weak, she admitted. I was terrified. After your father died, I couldn't breathe without panicking. Richard made me feel safe at first. Stable. By the time I saw who he really was, I was already trapped. You chose him over me. I chose survival. Her voice cracked. You don't know what it's like to be that afraid, Claire. To feel like if you make one wrong move, everything crumbles. I was 17 years old and he broke my wrist, I said flatly. You told the ER I fell off my bike. You looked them in the eye and lied. Tears streamed down her face. I know. Then you know why I left. Why I never came back. Why I'm taking everything Grandpa left me and not giving either of you a fucking penny. She nodded, crying harder now. Your grandfather called me 6 months ago, she whispered. He told me what he was doing. He said I didn't deserve anything because I'd failed you. Failed as a mother. He was right. I didn't know what to say. I'm not asking for money, Mom continued. I'm asking for a chance. To explain. To show you things I should have shown you years ago. What things? She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Richard doesn't know I have this. I've been documenting everything for 3 years. Recordings, photos, bank statements, evidence of things he's done that would put him in prison for a very long time. My pulse quickened. Why would you do that? Because I'm weak, Claire, but I'm not stupid. She pressed the USB drive into my hand. I knew someday I'd need an escape plan. Insurance. Maybe. Maybe this can be my way of finally protecting you, even if it's too late. I stared at the tiny device. What's on here? Mom's smile was broken and bitter. Proof that what Richard did to you was nothing compared to what he's been doing to everyone else. She drove away and left me standing there holding a bomb. I didn't open the USB drive that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat on the hotel bed, staring at it like it might explode. In a way, I knew it would. At 8:30 a.m., I walked into Gerald Whitmore's office with that USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls covered in framed victories, degrees from Yale Law, news clippings of cases that had destroyed powerful men. My grandmother was already there, sitting with perfect posture and a cup of tea. Gerald was mid-50s, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Matthews?" He greeted me with a handshake that felt like being evaluated. "Your grandmother has told me quite a bit about you. Forensic accountant, correct?" "Yes, sir." "Good. We'll need those skills." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have work to do." Grandma pulled out another folder. This one was even thicker than yesterday's. "Your grandfather hired private investigators," she said simply. 2 years ago. He wanted to know exactly who Richard really was before finalizing his will. Gerald opened the folder and spread documents across the conference table like a dealer shuffling cards. Police reports, financial records, court documents from 3 different counties. My hands went numb as I read. Richard had been fired from 2 previous corrections jobs for inappropriate conduct. The details were vague but disturbing. He'd been investigated twice for embezzlement, never charged, but never cleared either. He had a sealed juvenile record that the investigators couldn't fully access, but the summary they obtained mentioned violent assault of a family member. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "There's more," Gerald said. "Your grandfather documented every penny Richard borrowed over the years. $38,000 to be exact. Money he claimed was for business investments that never materialized. Money that was actually gambled away or spent on a woman he was seeing in Toledo." I looked at Grandma. "Did you know about this?" "Not until after Robert died. He kept it from me because he knew I'd confront Richard immediately." Her voice hardened. "He wanted everything documented legally before making a move." Then I remembered the USB drive. I pulled it out and placed it on the table. "Mom gave me this last night." Gerald's eyebrows rose. "What's on it?" "I don't know. I haven't looked." He inserted it into his laptop and we all crowded around the screen. What we found made the private investigator's report look like a speeding ticket. Audio recordings of Richard threatening Mom, videos of him screaming at her, throwing things, punching walls, bank statements showing he'd opened credit cards in her name, forged her signature, and racked up $43,000 in debt she didn't know existed. Emails to his girlfriend in Toledo discussing how he planned to convince my grandmother to sign over property rights after my grandfather died. How he'd already contacted a realtor about selling the house for cash. Text messages about a loan shark in Cleveland who was getting impatient about money Richard owed. And photos. Photos of bruises on Mom's arms, her back, her ribs. She'd been documenting everything, building a case, too terrified to use it. Gerald sat back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "This man is going to prison," he said simply. "The only question is how long." I felt something break open inside my chest. Not quite relief. Not quite rage. Justice. Maybe that's what it was. "But there's a complication," Grandma said quietly. "What complication?" She exchanged a look with Gerald. "Richard filed a counterclaim this morning. He's challenging the will, claiming your grandfather was mentally unfit when he signed it, and that you exercised undue influence from New York to manipulate an elderly man." My blood turned to ice. "He's lawyered up," Gerald continued, "and he's not going quietly." This wasn't over. This was just beginning. Richard's lawyer was exactly what I expected. Cheap suit, cheaper tactics, and a reputation for dragging cases out until clients gave up or went broke. Marcus Shelby. Advertised on bus benches and late-night cable. But he was also surprisingly competent when it came to small-town legal warfare. The counterclaim was filed with maximum publicity. Richard gave an interview to the local newspaper painting himself as the devoted son-in-law who'd cared for my grandfather, while I'd abandoned the family in pursuit of my big city career. The article painted me as a cold, opportunistic vulture who'd swooped in at the last minute to steal a grieving family's inheritance. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in a decade. Old high school classmates, former neighbors, even my 10th grade English teacher. Half were supportive. The other half wanted to tell me what a selfish bitch I'd become. I turned my phone off and focused on work. Gerald filed a motion to dismiss the counterclaim within 48 hours, supported by medical records proving my grandfather had been completely mentally competent up until 3 days before his death. He'd even taken a cognitive assessment specifically to prevent this kind of challenge. But Richard wasn't done. His next move was smarter, more personal. He filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened him with violence during our confrontation at the funeral. 3 of his drinking buddies signed affidavits supporting his claim. It was complete bullshit. But it was also effective theater. Suddenly, I couldn't go near the house, my house, without risking arrest. He's buying time, Gerald explained during an emergency conference call. Every delay works in his favor. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it gets, and the more public pressure builds. So what do we do? Gerald's smile was razor sharp. We stop playing defense and go nuclear. That afternoon, he filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Richard for fraud, elder exploitation, domestic violence, identity theft, and conversion of marital assets. We attached every piece of evidence: the recordings, the bank statements, the photos, the private investigator's report. All of it entered into public record. Within hours, Richard's employer, the County Corrections Department, placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. His girlfriend in Toledo suddenly stopped answering his calls, and Mom filed for emergency separation, moving in with my Aunt Linda. The local newspaper that had run Richard's sob story published a follow-up article with the headline, "Inheritance Dispute Takes Dark Turn." This time, I was the one who looked like the victim, because I was. But Richard wasn't finished. Cornered animals are dangerous, and Richard was running out of options. 2 nights later, I got a call from the county sheriff. "Ms. Matthews? This is Sheriff Bradford. I'm calling because there's been an incident at your grandfather's property. Someone broke in through a basement window, ransacked the study. We've got units on scene now." My stomach dropped. Was anything taken? Hard to say without you or your grandmother present to verify. Can you come down? I was there in 12 minutes. The study was destroyed. File cabinets overturned, drawers ripped open. Papers scattered everywhere like snow. They'd been looking for something. Grandma arrived shortly after, her face pale. "The safe," she whispered. We both ran to the closet where my grandfather's old floor safe was hidden under a false panel. It was open. The combination lock looked like it had been beaten with a hammer until it gave way. Inside, empty. "What was in there?" Sheriff Bradford asked. Grandma's voice shook. "The original deed to this property. From 1952, before county records were digitized. It's the only physical proof that this land was purchased by my husband's family, not jointly acquired during our marriage." The sheriff frowned. "Why does that matter?" Gerald, who'd arrived right behind us, answered grimly, "Because without that deed, Richard can argue the property was marital property with his wife, not a family inheritance. It changes everything." I felt the walls closing in. Richard had just stolen the keystone of our entire case. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in that hotel room doing what I do best, following the money. If Richard stole that deed, he did it for a reason. He had a plan. A buyer, maybe. Or leverage. I opened my laptop and started digging. Property records, court filings, business registrations. I traced every connection Richard had, every associate, every documented relationship. At 4:30 a.m., I found it. A LLC registered 3 weeks ago in Richard's cousin's name, RDM Holdings, RDM Richard David Morrison, not even trying to hide it. I dug deeper. That LLC had filed preliminary paperwork to purchase a property matching the exact legal description of my grandfather's land. The proposed buyer, a commercial development company out of Columbus, looking to build a storage facility complex. The proposed sale price, $800,000, far below market value, but enough to disappear on if you were desperate. Richard was planning to forge my grandmother's signature on a sale contract using that stolen deed as proof of ownership. He'd pocket the money and vanish before anyone could stop him. It was bold, stupid, and almost clever enough to work in the chaos of a legal battle. Almost. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Gerald with a message. "Call me immediately." He called at 7 a.m., voice sharp with caffeine and focus. "This is fraud on top of fraud," he said, "but it's also proof of intent. If we can prove he orchestrated the break-in to steal that deed—" "I can prove it," I said. "Give me 48 hours. Claire, if you're thinking about doing something illegal—" "I'm a forensic accountant, Gerald. I don't break laws. I just read them very, very carefully." I hung up and made another call. "Trevor? It's Clare Matthews. Remember that favor you said you owed me after the Hartman case?" Trevor Nguyen was a cybersecurity consultant I'd worked with on a corporate espionage case 2 years ago. He was brilliant, paranoid, and very good at finding digital breadcrumbs people thought they'd erased. "Claire, Jesus, I haven't heard from you in forever. What do you need?" "I need you to find out if someone accessed a specific property listing database in the last month. I have the LLC name and the property description." "That's technically a gray area, Claire." "I know. That's why I'm asking you, and not someone else." He sighed. "Send me the details." 26 hours later, Trevor called back. "Your guy is either the dumbest criminal I've ever seen or he's having a complete breakdown," Trevor said. He accessed the county assessor's database from his home IP address. Twice. Once 3 weeks ago to pull property records, and again 2 days ago, the same day as that break-in you mentioned, to verify deed information. "Can you document that?" "Already did. Sending you a forensic report with timestamps and IP logs. It'll hold up in court." I could have kissed him. "Trevor, you're a god." "I'm a hacker with a conscience. There's a difference." I forwarded everything to Gerald, who immediately filed emergency motions. One to freeze the LLC's accounts, one to halt any property transactions, and one to demand Richard's immediate deposition under oath. The judge granted all three. Richard was summoned to court for questioning in 6 days. But we still had one problem. That stolen deed was still missing, and without it, we couldn't definitively prove ownership. That night, Grandma called me with a trembling voice. "Claire, I just remembered something. Your grandfather. He was paranoid about losing important documents. He always made copies, multiple copies." "Where would he keep them?" Her voice brightened. "The bank. He had a safety deposit box at First National. I never thought to check." The next morning, we stood in that bank vault as the attendant opened box 347. Inside, copies of every important document my grandfather ever owned, including 3 notarized copies of the original property deed. Richard's Hail Mary had just become his confession. The deposition was held in a sterile conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Richard showed up in a suit that didn't fit right, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear right up until the court reporter said, "Please raise your right hand." I sat between Gerald and my grandmother, watching Richard squirm under oath. Gerald didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Morrison, when was the last time you entered the property located at 4762 Oakwood Lane?" I I don't recall exactly. Was it 3 nights ago when the property was broken into? No, I was home that night. Can anyone verify that? Richard hesitated. My wife can. Your wife, who filed for separation and is currently living with her sister? Marcus Shelby objected. Relevance. Gerald smiled. I'm establishing credibility. Let me rephrase. Mr. Morrison, do you know a man named Stephen Kowalski? Richard's face went pale. He's a friend. A friend who was arrested 2 days ago for the break-in at 4762 Oakwood Lane after his fingerprints were found on the basement window frame? Silence. Mr. Morrison, did you pay Stephen Kowalski to break into that property? I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right. This isn't a criminal proceeding, Richard. Gerald interrupted smoothly. You can invoke that right, but the judge will draw adverse inferences in the civil case. So I'll ask again. Did you orchestrate that break-in? Marcus put his hand on Richard's arm, but Richard shook him off. This is bullshit. That house should be mine. I took care of that old man for years while Princess here was off playing banker in Manhattan. You earned nothing. Grandma's voice cut through the room like ice. You borrowed money you never repaid. You abused my daughter. You planned to steal my home and sell it before anyone noticed. Richard's face turned purple. You have no proof. Gerald slid a folder across the table. IP address logs showing you accessed county property records from your home computer. Bank records showing you created an LLC to facilitate a fraudulent sale. Text messages between you and Mr. Kowalski discussing getting the deed in exchange for $5,000. Gerald leaned forward. Would you like me to continue? The fight drained out of Richard like air from a punctured tire. His lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My client wishes to take a break to consult. Your client is going to withdraw his counterclaim, Gerald said flatly. Today. And he's going to sign a document agreeing to vacate the property within 14 days, forfeit any claim to estate assets, and acknowledge his debt to the estate in the amount of $38,000. And if I don't, Richard's voice was hoarse, then I file criminal charges for fraud, burglary, and conspiracy. I send this evidence to the county prosecutor and your employer. And I personally ensure that every newspaper in Ohio knows exactly what kind of man you are. Gerald's smile was colder than winter. Your choice, Richard. Prison or a bus ticket out of town. Richard looked at his lawyer, at my grandmother, at me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just stared at him with the same expression I'd worn in that driveway when he hit me. The expression that said, "You don't scare me anymore." He broke first. Fine, I'll sign. Marcus started drafting the agreement immediately, desperate to salvage whatever he could. 30 minutes later, Richard's signature was on paper. The counterclaim was withdrawn. The house was officially, legally, irrevocably mine. As Richard stood to leave, he paused at the door. You're just like him, you know, he said bitterly. Cold, calculating. Your grandfather was a miserable old bastard, and you're turning into exactly the same thing. I met his eyes. Good, I said simply. He left, and I finally exhaled. Richard was gone within a week. No big goodbye. No dramatic final confrontation. He just loaded a U-Haul in the middle of the night and disappeared like the coward he'd always been. Mom stayed with Aunt Linda, too ashamed to face me but too broken to follow him. I didn't push her. Some bridges take time to rebuild, if they ever can be. The house was mine now, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like walking through a museum of trauma. Every room held memories I'd spent 11 years trying to forget. The kitchen where Richard had thrown a plate that shattered inches from my head. The stairs where he'd shoved me hard enough to leave bruises. The bedroom where I'd locked myself in and planned my escape to New York. Grandma found me standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. You don't have to keep it, she said softly. You can sell. Start fresh somewhere without all these ghosts. I considered that. It would be easier, cleaner. But I'd spent my entire adult life running from this place. Maybe it was time to reclaim it instead. I'm keeping it, I decided. But I'm gutting it. Every room. New paint, new floors, new everything. When I'm done, it won't look anything like the place I left. Grandma smiled. Your grandfather would like that. He always said houses are just wood and nails. It's the people inside that make them mean something. Over the next month, I hired contractors, ripped out carpets, tore down wallpaper, painted over every stain and scar. My firm gave me extended leave after I explained the situation. Turns out, having a reputation for taking down white-collar criminals makes you valuable enough to accommodate. I worked during the day and slept in that Holiday Inn at night. Slowly, the house transformed. The kitchen became bright and modern. The living room, warm and open. My old bedroom, the one I'd hidden in so many nights, became a home office with windows that let in so much light I had to buy new curtains. It stopped feeling like a crime scene and started feeling like potential. One afternoon, Mom showed up unannounced. She stood in the driveway, looking smaller than ever, holding a Tupperware container of her famous chocolate chip cookies. "Can I come in?" she asked. I almost said no, but Grandma's words echoed in my head. It's the people inside that make them mean something. "Yeah," I said. "Come in." We sat in the new kitchen, eating cookies in awkward silence. "I filed for divorce," Mom finally said. "It'll be final in 6 months." "Good. I'm seeing a therapist. Started going twice a week. She says I have something called complex trauma from years of abuse." Mom's voice cracked. "I know that doesn't excuse what I let happen to you, but I'm trying to understand why I became the person who looked away." I didn't know what to say. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "I don't know if I'd forgive me, but I want you to know. I'm proud of you. For getting out. For surviving. For coming back and fighting when I never could." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're stronger than I ever was, Claire. Stronger than I'll ever be." I reached across the table and took her hand. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase years of pain, but it was a start. "I'm not strong, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm just tired of being afraid." She squeezed my hand. "Maybe that's the same thing." We sat there together in the house that had tried to destroy us both. And for the first time in 11 years, it felt like home. 3 months later, the house was finished. It was beautiful, unrecognizable from the prison it used to be. I'd kept a few things from Grandpa's study: his leather chair, his favorite lamp, a photograph of him and Grandma on their wedding day. Everything else was new. A fresh start built on the foundation of everything we'd survived. But I still hadn't decided what to do with my life. New York felt like a different lifetime. My apartment there, my job, my routine, all of it seemed hollow now. Like I'd been playing a character for 11 years, and I'd finally taken off the mask. I was standing in the backyard, watching the sun set over the property line, when my phone rang. Gerald Whitmore. "Claire, I have news. Richard was arrested in Nevada this morning." My heart skipped. For what? Fraud. Turns out he tried to run the same scam out there. Found a widow, convinced her to marry him, tried to manipulate her finances. Except this widow happened to be a retired federal prosecutor who saw through him immediately and wore a wire during their conversations. I couldn't help it. I laughed. "He's looking at 5 to 10 years, Gerald continued. "And the prosecutor in Columbus wants to file additional charges related to the break-in and attempted fraud here. Between the two cases, Richard's not going to see freedom for a very long time. Justice. Real, tangible justice. Thank you, Gerald. For everything. Thank your grandfather. He set all of this in motion." Gerald paused. So, what's next for you? Back to Manhattan? I looked at the house, at the land, at the garden Grandma had started helping me plant. Actually, I think I'm staying. In Ohio? Yeah. Turns out this state has plenty of people who need a forensic accountant with a mean streak. I'm thinking about opening my own practice. Gerald's approval was evident in his voice. I know several firms that would kill to partner with you. I'll make introductions. After we hung up, I walked back inside. Mom was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. She'd been coming over more often, helping with the house, slowly rebuilding the relationship we'd lost. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Some conversations still hit triggers we were both learning to navigate, but we were trying. Grandma arrived shortly after, carrying a bottle of wine and a wicked smile. I heard about Richard, she said. Should we celebrate? Absolutely, I said. We ate dinner together. 3 generations of women who'd survived the same monster and came out the other side stronger. Over dessert, Grandma pulled out an old photo album. I've been meaning to show you these, she said. Pictures of you and your grandfather. From before. Before Richard. Before everything fell apart. There I was at 6 years old, sitting on Grandpa's shoulders at the county fair. At 8, helping him plant tomatoes. At 12, proudly showing off a science fair trophy. A whole lifetime I'd tried to forget, because the pain of what came after made it too hard to remember the good parts. He loved you so much, Grandma said softly, and he never stopped believing you'd come back. That's why he did all this. Not just to give you money or property, but to give you justice. To make sure the girl who deserved better finally got it. I looked at those photos, at the version of myself who still believed the world was safe, and felt something shift inside. Not closure, not exactly, but peace. Maybe that was better. I wish he could see what I did with the house, I said. Grandma smiled through tears. Honey, I think he can. We raised our glasses. To survival, to justice, to the long, hard road of healing, and to finally coming home. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with something better. Reclaiming everything that was stolen. My name is Clare Matthews. 11 years ago, I left this house with 2 suitcases and a promise to never look back. I kept that promise until my grandfather's death forced me to confront the monsters I'd been running from. I thought coming home would destroy me. Instead, it saved me. Richard's in prison now, facing charges in 2 states. Mom's rebuilding her life, one therapy session at a time. Grandma and I have dinner every Sunday in the house that tried to break us. And me? I opened that forensic accounting firm. Turns out, there are a lot of people like me, people who need someone in their corner who understands how to fight bullies with briefcases and legal documents. I take cases other people won't touch. Messy divorces, hidden assets, financial abuse, elder exploitation. I find the money, I build the case, and I make sure the bastards pay. Because I learned something important through all of this. You can't outrun your past. But you can face it head on, dismantle it piece by piece, and build something better from the wreckage. The house is beautiful now, unrecognizable from the nightmare it used to be. Just like me. If you're out there, living in fear, thinking you're trapped, you're not. Document everything. Find your allies. Build your case. And when the moment is right, strike with everything you've got. They'll call you cold, calculating, ungrateful. Let them. You're not those things. You're a survivor who decided to stop surviving and start winning. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me your story. I read every single one. And remember, the best revenge isn't anger. It's becoming someone they can never touch again. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.